Well, he was hired, and then he was fired. Hi, this is Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now. And Bill, a comedian whose name you may not have heard of before this week, Shane Gillis, lived the dream of many comedians around the country in that he successfully auditioned for and was hired by Saturday Night Live for its 45th season. There were only 3 comedians hired, and so that's a very small group. Within days, however, clips from a podcast that Gillis did in 2018 surfaced on the internet that showed him speaking in derogatory ways about racial minorities, such as people of Chinese descent, with homophobic slurs, and even with an insult to ISIS, which I'm not sure Saturday Night Live was as concerned about as they should be, but they eventually will be. Bill, it seems to me that the whole enterprise of comics since Lenny Bruce, at least, has been to be as shocking as one could possibly be. Has Saturday Night Live suddenly decided that they made a wrong turn back in the early 1960s and we need to finally start treating people with decency and respect?
That's certainly the explanation they will give you as they try to show you that they are not only virtuous, but please, please, please don't make our sponsors go away. And another conservative is born. If you are a comedian or a comic, especially an improv comic, as somebody just getting started, and you've got a lot of talent and a lot of abilities to do characters, you go into Saturday Night Live audition, despite the fact that this show is long past its sell date. That is probably the greatest single moment of your life, the greatest single opportunity that you're going to have. And when you get a call and say you're in, that's as good as it's going to get for that guy in his life. I'm sorry to say that, but I'd be willing to bet that was the case. So then to get a call a few days later, a few hours later, a few weeks later, whatever the case may be, saying, hey, we've decided that we cannot be seen with you because of this toxic thing you said or something that you may have said. My response to that would be, I was joking. And do you know why? Do you know I can prove I was joking? I make jokes for a living. That's my job. That's my job. That's what I do. That's why you hired me. You hired me to make jokes. But needless to say, humor is one of the many, 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 many wonderful byproducts of civilized life that progressivism is determined to stamp out. Any form of pleasure really has got to go. Any form of happiness, anything that gets us off of the endless perennial rage at all of these terrible injustices has simply just, there's no place for this in modern progressive society. So it's got to be destroyed. Now here's the part that I think is especially shameful on the part of Saturday Night Live. And the fact that I've given this some considerate thought in the 20 or 30 seconds I've had since we started this episode, but I think it's important to go ahead and do this to show just how much society has changed. Saturday Night Live got the reputation it got from its original cast members. In 1975, we had a healthy society, and Saturday Night Live was a subversive look at a fundamentally healthy society, and it caught on like wildfire because people liked the idea of being able to rebel against the general authority. You were seeing things on TV that you'd never seen before. The first glance I got of Saturday Night Live, I had no idea what it was. I was just changing channels, and I saw Chevy Chase strip down and have a bra on underneath, and I really just, what is this? What am I seeing? So Saturday Night Live got where it is through outrage. That's why Saturday Night Live is Saturday Night Live, because of outrage, because of taunting the system. So just to remind those people at Saturday Night Live who are now on their high horse about making jokes in the past that may seem insensitive, I remember specifically 2 sketches from the first or second year of Saturday. It must have been the first year because Chevy Chase was in it. One of them was Chevy Chase interviewing Richard Pryor. Right. And he says, I'm going to ask you a word and you give me your answer. And he says this and that. And he says, darky and so on. And then finally, Chevy Chase looks right at him and says, nigger. And then Richard Pryor says, dead honky. And everybody laughs. And Everybody laughed because it was funny, it was based in reality, and it was true. But yes, they used the N-word on Saturday Night Live and made a joke about that. And then Garrett Morris did a segment that I also remember when the gold market was really booming and they were selling Krugerrands, and Garrett Morris sat there in a plush leather chair with a smoking jacket and so on, and he was selling niggerrands from some South African country. I have no doubt that he wrote that sketch himself. Now, just the fact that I said those words out loud today is going to cause some people's heads to explode, and I don't care. I don't care. It's a hateful word when it's employed hatefully, but this is just a description of how the word was used on the air on Saturday Night Live in the presence of the entire country, and Saturday Night Live got famous for it, and now for them to say that you said something offensive in the past is pretty low on the integrity scale. But then again, Saturday Night Live hasn't been Saturday Night Live since the first year of Saturday Night Live.
Well, Bill, I saw an interview. David Spade has a talk show and formerly a cast member on Saturday Night Live. And he was interviewing Bill Burr, the comedian, as well as another comedian I hadn't heard about whose name is Jim Jeffries. And he sounded like he was British. Not that I mean anything by that. But in any case, Jim Jeffries pointed out that early on in the life of Saturday Night Live, John Belushi had a sketch where he essentially spoke fake Japanese and waved
Samurai
a sword around
delicatessen.
in the air. And as Jim Jeffries says, that was the whole sketch.
That was it.
The whole funny thing was that he was pretending to be Japanese.
And he cuts a sandwich with his katana.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and Bill Burr basically said, where do we go from here if you can't do comedy? But here's what Saturday Night Live said. And I want to quote from the spokesperson for producer Lorne Michaels, who's still the producer after these many years. He took some time off, but he's back and he's been there for a while. We want SNL, Saturday Night Live, to have a variety of voices and points of view within the show. And we hired Shane on the strength of his talent as a comedian and his impressive audition for SNL. We were not aware of his prior remarks that have surfaced over the past few days. The language he used is offensive, hurtful, and unacceptable. We are sorry that we did not see these clips earlier and that our vetting process was not up to our standard. Bill, I just wonder, what happened to their vetting process since they vetted John Belushi?
They stopped vetting for comedic genius and started vetting for political correctness. And it was a slow process. It took 30 years, 40 years. But that's the world that they've created now. Now I get a certain amount of gleeful pleasure out of listening to people who I admire enormously for their comic work, although I have a very low opinion of them in terms of their personal opinions. And let's just go right to the second funniest man who ever lived after Richard Pryor, and that'd be, in my opinion, John Cleese. John Cleese is out there constantly complaining about politically correct culture and how it's ultimately just simply not only killed comedy, but it's killing free speech. My response to that would be, well, John, this is the inevitable outcome of the left-wing policies that you've been promoting for the last 35 or 40 years. You made this bed, now you get to lie in it. You're the people that created a world of collectivism, a world of victimology. That's been the entire strategy of the left for the last 25, 30 years. And you've been a big outspoken leftist. And now you have the natural, inevitable, logical outcome of a world where victimhood trumps and racism trumps everything. You now have a world where no one can say anything without somebody being offended. And then if somebody is offended, they'll launch a campaign, and that will be the end of the advertising thing. It's the cancel culture. That's what it's been called. It was created by left-wingers, and it's been created by the left-wing ideology, and they did nothing to stop it. And what they could have done to stop it, by the way, is they could have mocked it. They could have actually just mocked it for the repressive fascist kind of ideology that it is. But they didn't, because they were left-wingers, every one of them, and big liberals and Democrats and so on. So they sat there and smiled when Obama was president. And all throughout the Obama presidency, the only jokes we heard during the Obama presidency were jokes about George Bush. Okay.
Well, Bill, that's not fair, because they actually did make a joke where where President Obama was played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and appeared to be a real badass, tough guy in the White House. So wasn't that?
Yeah, boy, you want to talk about a smear, huh? What a smear. I'm being portrayed by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and I'm a butt kicker. My God, how do I survive the shame of this public thrashing?
So let me read you what Shane Gillis wrote himself. He released a statement on Thursday. Now, this is Shane Gillis, the comedian who will not be working on the 45th season of Saturday Night Live.
Right.
He said, "I'm a comedian who pushes boundaries." And this he said on Twitter, of course, because that's where people say things. "I sometimes miss. If I go through my 10 years of comedy, most of it bad, you're going to find a lot of bad misses. I'm happy to apologize to anyone who's actually offended by anything I've said. My intention is never to hurt anyone, but I'm trying to be the best comedian I can be, and sometimes that requires risk." Bill, that sounds a lot like Sorry Not Sorry.
I don't think it sounds like Sorry Not Sorry at all. It sounds like sorry.
Well, he's getting hammered on the internet because basically he said, "I would be willing to apologize personally to anybody who was actually offended at anything I said."
So my prior statement about this being the single great chance of your life is evidenced in this apology. And I had not heard about the apology, but I have to tell you, of everything that's wrong with this story, everything that this story indicates is wrong with society, that apology is, to me, by far the most repulsive aspect of it. Because what it has done is it has taken somebody whose job it is to mock people, to make fun of things, to point a pin at the balloon of society. And not only has he been quieted and censored and shut up by the people who are going to air him on television, they have had such pressure on him now that he is now censoring himself. And this is actually
And he didn't even get the job.
No, of course not. He probably still thinks he might have a shot at it, but in any event, whether he does or doesn't, that's not the point. The point is this kind of groveling, sniveling apology for things that he said in jest, and apparently, I've never heard of him either, but apparently, if he was funny enough to get the spot on Saturday Night Live, he's certainly going up some tough competition. So for him to grovel like this and to apologize for doing his job is absolutely revolting. And this is the kind of social pressure that the left brings on everybody. Remember that guy when Colin Kaepernick was first doing the protests, the kneeling protests, and one guy came out of the locker room by himself and stood there, for the national anthem, had his heart over his chest. He's a big American hero for about a day.
He's a military veteran as well, yes.
Yeah, that's right. Till finally he was forced to come out and say, "I didn't know the rest of the guys were in the locker room. I thought they were right behind me doing what I was doing." Okay, so you did something that some people didn't like, and now you apologize, and now you did something that the other people who originally supported you don't like. What this guy's issuance of that apology is an abject surrender to the fascism that has cost him this job. If he had been any kind of a person of character, it is inconceivable to me that Richard Pryor would issue an apology like that. Inconceivable to me. Lenny Bruce, we know what Lenny Bruce would have said about something like that. And so the role of the comic, the role of the jester, which used to be the only person in the court, the only person in the land who could make fun of the king, the only person with that power, has simply said to the king, "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, if my joke about your funny hat upset you. From now on, I will do nothing but flatter you and be at your beck and call." That's not why jesters were hired. Jesters existed because people needed to hear the truth, and sometimes the only way you could speak the truth was in jest. So what this guy has done is he's not only abandoned his own integrity and decency, but he has also basically abdicated the entire reason for his existence. I have said a few things in my life that people have demanded that I apologize for, and I flat out refused. And I was threatened with the loss of my job at the previous network if I did not apologize. And I said, "Well, you are going to have to fire me, because if I apologize for this, then that is an admission that somebody could possibly have taken what I said seriously." And I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think there's a single person who could have taken what I said about shooting Californians coming into Texas on site with rocket launchers if you have to. I cannot believe for a second that anybody would take that seriously, but I am not going to apologize for it, and that's that. So you can decide what you want to do with me. It's entirely your decision. I work for your private company, and if you find that to be a liability now instead of an asset, I completely understand. So I got off with a warning. And I didn't particularly heed that warning either. But that's one reason why it's nice to be employed by the members at BillWhittle.com, because nobody is holding that kind of gun to my head or your head or anybody else's head for that matter. We work for a small number of people who are dedicated to the ideas of free speech and intellectual debate, the marketplace of ideas. And for us to simply surrender to the idea that this is what Saturday Night Live is saying. They are saying that from now on, everybody must speak in such a way so that the most easily offended member of society, no matter what particular area that may be, everyone must speak in such a way so that no one is ever offended by anything, which is not only just obviously impossible, but revolting and disgusting and simply the kind of society that it's a police state that's enforced by Facebook instead of by jackboots and submachine guns. And this is the world they've built, and that's their business, and that world applies to them. But the beautiful thing about this is that world does not apply to us. In other words, if the Nazis were to come in and terrorize people, they would terrorize everybody because they've got guns, and the people didn't. But if the left decides that they want to eat one of their own in order to show their virtue to everybody else, it's just another nail in the coffin of an unsustainable ideology of victimhood, which has to constantly top itself again and again and again because there is no real injustice for it to get upset about. So it has to constantly find a way to top the last example of the virtue signaling. And what you end up with is this disgraceful, disgusting, unfunny, absolutely gray, rigid, furious role that the progressives want for society. And the more they show their hand, the more the American people have decided they are not interested. So I hope they keep it up, frankly. I hope that they take it even further. I hope that if somebody ever said that they wrote a white paper on something, that would consider them immediately a white supremacist. I'd like all of that to happen to them, because I'm immune to it, you're immune to it, and the people that watch this are immune to it. We don't care what these people say. We know how they work. So there you go. It's another nail in the coffin for the left. It's another conversion of at least one guy, and probably the people around him, and probably most of the comedians who are in the business are looking at this, as they have for 10 years now, and saying, what the hell's going on? Well, what the hell's going on is the outcome of the kind of politics that you guys back. So if you don't like a society where you're not allowed to say anything, you might want to think about switching teams.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have just enjoyed another demonetized video from our distributor, YouTube. We're grateful for the members at BillWhittle.com who make it possible for us to make videos that can be demonetized on YouTube, because they are the heartbeat, the fuel for this enterprise. We're grateful to them.
I wonder what might have caused that.
I have no idea.
No idea at all.
In fact, YouTube anymore, when we post the videos, the rapidity with which they are make their instant demonetization decision is incredible. They have fine-tuned the algorithm for Bill Whittle videos. If you want to be part of the team that keeps free speech coming, that doesn't mind a little humor, even if it's at your own expense, then go and join the members at BillWhittle.com. Click that Become a Member link. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thank you.